Hey everyone, hope you guys are doing well. Today is day 11 of coronavirus quarantining. As you guys can see, I'm feeling a lot better. I feel like I'm going to be able to go to work on Monday, which is great. And I think hopefully the worst is over for now. So, very thankful to have gone through this, and very thankful that for everyone's well wishes and asking me how I'm doing and inquiring and learning more about the disease together. Most of my previous videos have been about the symptoms and the process of it. So if you're interested, just take a look at those videos. And but today I actually want to go spend more time on some of the reflections that I've had through this experience and how it could relate to um, the situation at large. So uh, I'm going to just basically in my living room, and it's a whiteboard. That's why I'm using it. So some some of the thoughts that I've had is around the responses that we have when we find out that like that when people find out that I have tested positive for coronavirus, there's a response that usually comes about. Um, there are responses that I believe are based out of fear and responses that are based more out of love. And it's a spectrum. So it's not absolutes, but there are questions about how I got sick. And sometimes when we ask those, you can infer that the meaning behind it is really, yo, did you get me sick? Or did you get my family sick? Uh, like, there's that. And then there's things like, are you stupid? Like, did you not do what we're supposed to do? Do you not realize we're in a pandemic? And then there's when you see articles of people going to bars or whatever and then they get sick, there's a certain response of like, oh man, those people are stupid. Like I would never do such a thing like that. Um, and these types of responses create distance, I feel. And they're probably out of fear. And this is the self-awareness island here. These are all just clusters of different thoughts and stuff. So we'll eventually get to those. I don't know if you're gonna watch until those, but I do hope to eventually get to those. But there's probably underlying behind the questions of how did you get sick, there's probably a fear. And if it's coming from like, hey, did you get me sick? There's probably an underlying fear that they will get sick and that they may experience pain or they may inflict pain on others unintentionally, or they may not be strong enough uh, to live through coronavirus. So there's a fear behind that. And there's something that can be said about when we ask these types of questions, why we ask that. Do I ask that or do I want to find out more information to judge the person, to condemn them, or is it to learn from them? And or a combination of those, or how much of these is behind the question of why we're asking that. And uh, on the other side, there's questions or responses when so the stimulus is me sharing that I tested positive for COVID. And then the response, there could be responses that I interpret to be more loving. Questions or responses such as, how can I help? Um, or I've also shared that one of my fears is that people will think less of me for having caught somehow coronavirus, um, and think less of the products that I'm working on or think less of anything related to me. And so their response is, hey, like, Ed, I don't think any less of you. I recognize your fear, your insecurities, that I'm not good enough, basically, and my fear that, where did I put it? Yeah, that I'm not worthy or whatever. Um, then that's one of my worries. And they're like, hey, I'm gonna address that straight up. Like, I know that that's what you're thinking, but for what it's worth, I don't think any less of you. And then there's let's grasp some. So losing the sense of taste is one of the taste and smell. Losing the senses of those are one of the primary symptoms that I exhibited. And they're like, hey, let's grab some tasty food together when you get better. And then a really uh, great response, or one that I felt was very loving, was one from a friend that said like, "Oh man, like man, sorry to hear what happened to you, and like, I want you to know that you're family, and that there are people who support you 100%, no matter what. Like, we are there for you and your family." And I feel like these types of responses, the the desired outcome is really to develop closeness, and the outcome from the other types of responses are to create distance. So to distance yourself from the stimulus, or in this case, coronavirus or me. And I find that when under these, uh, my interpretation of some of these responses, I then have a choice. Then that becomes the new stimulus. And then my response is either fear or love. Uh, I and this is why I kind of got thinking about this, is that I recognized that I was feeling and thinking very defensive thoughts early on, especially when I was sharing that I had coronavirus, that I felt very defensive when I interpreted, whether it's correctly or not, that some people have tried to ask me like, oh, how did you get sick? With really an intention that they're scared of them having gotten sick themselves, and wanting to create distance from me. And then my response, typically from fear, is, hey man, like, screw you, I don't need you. Like, and it's just like very defensive, very upsetting type of like responses, to think that people that think this. So because they hate, or because they fear, then that elicits then the same type of response from me. Um, and I recognize that, and I'm like, wait, that's just going to go down a whole chain of fear if I go like, yo, why are you asking me that, man? Like, you think I got you sick? For all I know, you got me sick, right? Like, so it becomes this whole like whole defensive dialogue in my head that would continue on into creating more distance, basically. The end result will be that we will be very distant. So uh, I was thinking like, man, how do we counteract these types of uh, emotions or unnecessary, unhelpful thoughts? So I think self-awareness is a large part of that. And to be self-aware really of what our insecurities are, our fears, what we're trying to avoid, and just any physical tension that we might have. And so and this is kind of like a culmination of like, different people that I know and stuff like that, and what I think people fear and have insecurities about. So like, are we trying to prove is my action, my words, to prove myself to the world, or to prove myself to myself? Am I insecure about my power, uh, my uniqueness, and my worthiness of love or privilege? As you can see, like, this is getting really into starting to expand further into thoughts in the same context as race relations, particularly in America. And those have weighed heavily as well on my mind as I watched through the debates and just current events. So you can we'll like, yeah, we're going to move away from specifically the coronavirus, but more broadly to the current political climate as well. So, like, there's fear of pain, failure, weakness, of not being good enough, of like revenge for those who we've wronged, or potentially a losing relevance in competition. Um, and am I trying to not educate myself or not change my perspective as a way to try to avoid responsibility, some guilt, or a level of discomfort? So um, I think those are all things that when we retrospect, we can begin to actually move from the fear-based results or fear-based responses to learn to try to like forgive. One actually is not knowing whether or not this is an interpretation of this is yeah an interpretation of the questions that are being asked and the manner in which they are being asked and the timing of those questions, to interpret that there is a fear-based and a condemnation in those responses. And then which may or may not even be true. They might be coming from a place of love. Um, but there's an element of forgiveness that needs to happen. And from I'm not Christian, but from a biblical perspective, like, forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they're doing, or something like that. For they know not what they do. And that's a very powerful concept as a way to try to move away from the fear-based response path down to the love-based uh, responses that I think may be more beneficial to everyone. Um, and you can see the whole chain reaction that could happen. So then what happens, like, when you turn the other cheek and when you forgive them for, you assume that they don't know what they're doing. But what if they actually know what they're doing and they're still doing it? You turn the other cheek and you don't got many cheeks left to turn. So what if, so like, what if they are proud of actually oppression? So what if you believe that I am superior to you? So now I'm trying to empathize with um, basically white supremacists, and it doesn't even have to be white supremacists. It's actually, it could be any oppressive group, and definitely not all white people are white supremacists. I feel like I don't know who's gonna watch this or who's gonna watch this in or out of context. So uh, just know that I'm trying to understand the state of the world as it is, and trying to point us more towards a response of love as opposed to fear. And so now I'm basically thinking about the the empathy, the how would I think if I was basically imagining myself as a white man in America right now. So, and if I have a mindset of I am superior to you, to other people who do not look like me. So I would think so. And I just watched the Black Klansman, the movie, yesterday on Netflix. It was really good. So this is also tied into the things that I'm sharing as well. But if I'm thinking I am superior to you, I'm probably thinking immigrants, other people have diluted my salvation, and my problems are because of you. You're not making it better. You're actually making it worse. And I can do anything right now. I have real freedom. I can kill you. I can rape you. And I don't, Like, I don't know if anything really is going to happen, especially if I wear a uniform. So I could basically do anything right now. So why change? I am less powerful when I share my rights with you. That's probably a large part of the dialogue that some people may think, that I am genetically superior to you and I am in power right now. And because it's a cyclical type of thinking, that because I'm genetically superior, I am in power, and thus I can do anything, and thus I am better than you, and thus I should continue to flex my superiority because it justifies my current position and my current privileges. And so you're telling me to give up my power when I'm already top of the food chain. You're saying we're better together, but how are we better together if life is already top shelf right now for me? I could do anything I want right now. How are you going to make it better other than by diluting my salvation and my God-given rights? So there's a big what's in it for me. That's what's in it for me to change. And I think that's, so there's like some key questions here that I really would invite you to share your thoughts on. But like the first one, well, it's really the second one that I put here, but the first one in this flow of explanation or sharing of some thoughts, which may or may not be accurate. And if they're not, then I'd like to get your thoughts on it too. But what's in it for me? If you were a powerful white person in America, why would I want to give that up? What's in it for me? So until we can answer that question, until we can help them answer that question for why it's better, why Black Lives Matter, why immigrants are helpful to society, why your life can be better with a diverse population, I don't know that their stance will change. And these issues that we've been dealing with for 400 years will continue for the next 400 years until we can answer this question of what's in it for me as the bodies in power right now to relinquish some of that power, to share that power. So that's major question number one. And I wish, hold on. Okay, one. Okay, so I'm going to change this up. So number two, oh well, or whatever this is. All right, is how can we minimize the distance from those who wish there to be distance? So this is kind of a referral to this, where I am intentionally trying to distance myself from you by saying I'm better than you. And I want that because I enjoy certain privileges and you don't, and I want to continue enjoying those privileges. So I make myself out to be better than you in order to justify it to myself as to why I enjoy these privileges. And so I want that distance to be there in order for me to continue enjoying my lovely life. And for those who wish there to be distance, how can we minimize that distance so that we can live probably more in harmony? So there are some thoughts down here. These are like legitimate questions. Like these are questions that I hope that you will comment and reply on or send a video message hopefully you can choose the loving path and not this path in your response. But um, some of the things that I think that can be done to minimize the distance from those who wish to be distanced, to recognize that we are all connected, is to help when needed. So when they are forced in a vulnerable position, so it's rare for people in power to be vulnerable. And so when they are vulnerable, then we can help them. And that can be one way, one path for them to feel empathy. Another way is having a common enemy. So that's like a classic unifying thing. Like that's why like the Russians and Chinese always typically come up as a way to unite North Americans, really, against basically, quote unquote, a common enemy. And it's easier that way. Or back in the Nazis, or back in World War II, or before World War II, when the Nazis were in power, we blame it on the Jews and the Gypsies and other people. So having a common enemy, in a sense, unites people. And the common enemy, really, that we can have now, I think, is climate change. Like there was the flagship report that the IAEA published this year. And it's the International Energy Agency. Their finding from their report is basically that. So I was reading just the abstract. So this is definitely not the full story. And so from the abstract that I was reading, there requires a major acceleration of clean energy innovation. Otherwise, the net zero carbon emission targets that we've set will not be achieved. And so all of this will be changed forever, basically. Basically, like if we don't get our act together, the planet is messed. Like we really need SpaceX to go to Mars from that's not a plan B. That is the only plan if we don't figure out how to innovate our energy sources better. So like that's a good common enemy, I think, like because we kind of screwed up our planet and now we gotta fix it. Otherwise this planet won't be the same beautiful planet that we know. So that could be a potential common enemy. We can educate the next generation, for sure. Educating them on empathy. Empathy can lead to tolerance, which could lead to respect, which could lead to acceptance, and then hopefully celebration. This is something, so I talked with Larry, my 71-year-old white male roommate, and I was sharing this with him yesterday night actually, and he was saying like, yeah, another thing that we could potentially do is incentivize the change. How that will look like, I don't know. We don't know, but that's another way. He was basically saying that like some are lost causes, and some are haters because they want to hate, and haters gonna hate. So those are not his words. Those were my interpretation of his words. But I feel like, especially for Black Lives Matter in particular, typically there's a lot of things that I don't care to go into conflict with because I honestly just don't care enough. So we can agree to disagree, and that's fine because whatever, your life, you do whatever you want. My life, whatever. So we can agree to disagree. But Black Lives Matter is not a matter that we can agree to disagree on. Like we can't disagree on Black Lives Matter. I can't think Black Lives Matter and you don't think Black Lives Matter and we'll just agree to disagree. This is not one of those things that we can agree to disagree on, because my inaction to that will empower the oppressors. And so black people will die. Like literally, that's literally the thing. Like that's literally the result of that. And so this is not an issue that we can just agree to disagree on and say, "Oh, well, man, these are big questions. I don't know what we're gonna do." Uh, the longer it takes for us to figure this out, then the more emboldened oppressors can become, and the more victims there will be unnecessarily. And as we think through this, I'll just go through the third question. So basically, like, how can we recognize that we are a global family? Um, so again, like this fostering of closeness, like this recognition that we're all connected. There is no real border here. Like that's a political. Man created this border, this invisible border, but there's nothing there. Like there's nothing from a natural perspective that's actually there. All these countries are just constructs that we've created um, for control and power. And how do we recognize that we're all just a global family, and that just because you look different from me or you talk different from me, that your life is less valuable or worthy than mine? So how can we recognize that you and I are the same? And just to let you guys know, like it was he was black. My buddy was black. The guy who told me this, which meant a lot to me. Uh, when we were saying like, yo, we're family, like and there's people there, myself included, that 100% will support you. And it's the same vice versa. But how do we foster that? Sorry, how do we foster that for everyone? And how can people see this more readily? And like it goes towards even like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men. Like they are us. Like they are part of the family too. So like there's sometimes, like especially hearing like Trump getting coronavirus and going to the hospital on his first day, like there are some responses that are like, yo, you deserve that. Like you like that, you had it coming, and stuff like that. But this desire to eliminate others is not the answer, I don't think. And historically speaking, there's not much. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that it's not an effective way to make your life better, like the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, the Holocaust for sure, like the residential school systems that we have in Canada, like the Muslims in China. Like, I mean, minorities are targets, and there have been historically many attempts, the Rwandan genocide, many attempts, historically speaking, to eliminate those that are not us, quote unquote. And I don't know that has really made the world a better place, to be honest. So I think even our response to like other people's racism, if we wish harm upon them, then it is the same sentiment that they have of us, quote unquote. And it's kind of funny that because we both think that we are more evolved and that others are ignorant, and I see the truth. And it's funny that like let's say the Black Lives Matter supporters, and then the pro-Trump or the white supremacists, both sides believe that they are more evolved, that the other person doesn't know what they're talking about. The other party is ignorant, and it's like ridiculous in a sense that both parties are united in thinking the other person is not as evolved as we are. And so I would say, like, show us, like, solve these historically unsolvable problems. If we are actually more evolved, if we are actually less ignorant, if we are actually more intellectually superior, how can we solve these questions without violence? Which, again, historically speaking, it just ends when one side has exhausted their resources to continue that discussion. How can we do that? So let's not use this. Let's not just try to wipe out the other guys, basically. But how do we solve these questions in a non-violent way? And again, these are some initial thoughts that I had, but I'm only one perspective, and so here there's also a thought about the observer vantage. So we are a species that's divided, not recognizing that we are all connected, which is kind of hilarious in a sense. But the current state of our union is very fragile. Like, we are a species divided, and this is literally a map of the world. But this is not what the world actually looks like. Again, these are political constructs that we've developed to separate us from other people. So we as a human species are heavily divided. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, whatever. But the truth is that we are all connected. But one thing that might help is to look at it from an observer vantage. So I'm not black, and I'm not white, and I'm not even American. And yet I'm commenting on things that, like, basically you could say, mind your own business. But we are all connected. And what happens in the US ripples throughout the world. The US is the most powerful nation the world has ever seen. And I'm just an observer. But so what the heck do I know? Not much. That is the answer. But something that the observer can offer is a different vantage point from the players in the game. So you can think of it like even the best, like, players in any sport has a coach. A team has a coach, and even like Federer has a coach, and he's like the best. He's like a GOAT, like greatest of all time. And they have coaches specifically because they can offer a different vantage point as an observer instead of being in the game. And so that's what these are some of the things that I see. I would like to encourage you to share your thoughts, because these are, I think, like, I don't know how much progress we will make. It will basically continue protests on both sides until we can answer these questions, recognizing that both sides of the protest is not to try to create distance, actually, but how can we protest in a way that will actually emphasize our closeness and how related we are. And I think my phone's running low on memory again. So this is a Bible verse that was shared that I think is really powerful, Ephesians 4:29. So do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So I'm going to end off with that because I think this video may have ended already. So I'm going to go eat lunch. Take care.